I'm Rebecca, and chances are you might know me from the Facebook group Lady Storm Hackathons. If you don't, join them. They're a very great, supportive environment for women in tech, mostly college-age and new grad tech people though. But to the point, every month I get a dozen questions about like, hey, how do you explore for, saying, how do you apply for the Explore internship? Or like, how do you be an intern at Microsoft? What got you noticed? And instead of answering all those questions individually, I figured, hey, let's make a YouTube video about it. So this YouTube video is mostly going to be focused on the Explore internship process and how I became that. I'm going to do a video later on for the PM interview process because that is different. So the structure of this video will be, first I'll go over my experiences applying for the Explore internship, and then I'll discuss patterns in what I saw with my friends going through the application process, what I personally think Microsoft was looking for, and then just go into any extra details that didn't come up before. So backstory, I was an Explore intern after my second year of school. I had already interned at Ancestry after my freshman year. And what a lot of people don't know is I actually applied to be an Explore intern my freshman year. I didn't actually even apply. The Microsoft recruiter was at my school and I handed her my resume and she's like, you know nothing about CS. And I'm like, oh, thank you. But anyway, I was waiting a few weeks to get my resume in order to make it look like I actually knew something even though I didn't. And then I got an email back from the recruiter saying, you've been rejected for your application of being an Explore intern. And I'm like, well, I never applied. And you know, it's even worse to be like, I know it's always bad to get a rejection letter, but it's even worse when it's something you didn't apply to. It's more like, yeah, we're gonna stop you now. Like, no, we don't need to see this. I'm like, cool, thank you. But the very next year, my recruiter actually emailed me back on that same exact thread saying like, hey, do you want to interview? It's been a year. And I, of course, playing hard to get, I was like, yeah, why not? Wouldn't hurt. Yeah, that's bad advice. Don't play hard to get. Just be yourself. Be normal. Don't be normal. Be yourself. We're gonna go with that one. But anyway, so they ended up setting up my phone interview, and the rest is history. One little detail though that I thought I should add to that though is I actually ended up getting a recommendation the second year. I was at Grace Hopper and I started like analyzing this guy I was talking to who works at Microsoft, and he's like, whoa, that's so accurate. And then he's like, he brought me up to this other woman at Microsoft and he's like, analyze her. So I did, and he's like, wow. And then he's like, you know what, I'm going to test you. So he brought me to this third woman who I'd only seen for 10 seconds. Like, I didn't have enough time to even observe her to do anything to really analyze her. And I ended up giving a really good analysis. And he turns to me and he's like, you're really good at understanding people. I'm going to recommend you to Microsoft. But something I want to put out there is recommendations don't carry that much weight at Microsoft. They will get you noticed in a pile of resumes, like they'll usually get you to phone screen, but they have nothing to do with your actual offer amount. So now we'll go into the story of my phone screen. My phone screen, it was well, it was via phone. It was also at 9 a.m. I made sure to schedule it early because I knew that A, it was my only option, but B, I figured, hey, I'm gonna be half asleep at 9 a.m. And that's probably when I'm at my worst, because it is when I'm at my worst. I have zero filter. I'm kind of a terrible person, or terribly unfiltered, we should say. But I figured if they accept me at 9 a.m., they'll accept me at 10 a.m., at 3 p.m., you know, when I'm actually like a good version of myself. You know, find the people that accept you at your worst. But back to the phone screen. So pretty much, I ended up getting one question about logic. It was something about like, there's apples and oranges, and then a box of apples and oranges, but they got their name tags reversed. Which one should you grab from to be able to figure out what's in each bucket? I also got a ton of questions on teamwork, working groups, my past projects. Another thing that's important to have ready for a lot of companies, because they all ask you this and I always forget this, is they'll be like, oh, when can you start? And they're only asking this because there are 3 main waves of Explore interns, but pretty much they just want to know what wave to put you in. It really doesn't influence anything at all. Maybe a little bit about which pool of applicants you're in, but you really have no say. The only point there is look up your school schedule ahead of time so you know when you could start. And like know when your last day of school is. Just like write it down somewhere, have it handy. That'll be fine. They also asked, one question they asked me, I don't know if they ask this every interview, but like the one that stands out the most to me was, what makes a good programmer? And you know, like one of my classmates was just being like rude and sexist the week before. So my answer was like, someone who writes good code that's like fast and doesn't have too many errors and adds comments, but really it's more important to be a good person. And I went on this like long rant about how I'd rather be surrounded in an environment working with good people than good programmers. And then apparently they liked it because I made it to the next round. Don't know if that was what they were expecting to hear though, but as I said, it was 9 a.m. I had no filter. So, something else you guys should note is Microsoft always says, like, we'll get back in 1 or 2 weeks. They never get back in 1 or 2 weeks. It has nothing to do with your quality of your interview or anything about you. It's on them. They're a big company. Everything's a mess. Kind of like, no, I shouldn't say that. But anyway, just big company, so don't take it personally if they don't get back to you. They told me it'd be 1 or 2 weeks. For me, it ended up being like 3.5, like almost a month. Like I thought they were ghosting me by that point. But yeah, Microsoft's actually good about not ghosting applicants. Like they'll tell you if they reject you, which is actually kind of considerate if you think about it. But yeah, another thing that I want you guys to note is it's important if you're applying for SWE intern to read Cracking the Coding interview ahead of time. As an Explore intern, you really don't need it that much if you're paying attention in your objects class and like structure class, and like as long as you can do like ifs and like if you know what a table is and like list and a list array, that's pretty much all the structure you'll need. But I really didn't need anything about algorithms. Maybe I think I had to tell if something was like O of N during one of my later interviews, but like nothing in the phone screen required Cracking the Coding interview, and reading it wasn't the best use of time. Like if you're going for SWE internship, yeah, read it. You don't really need it for an Explore internship though. Oh yeah, so another thing is when they told me that I got the on-site, I actually tried changing the date of it, but then they told me they couldn't. Something that's important to note is for the Explore internship as well as for the finance internship, they only do they do this giant interview every month towards the beginning or middle of the month. That way, like, they have fewer days dedicated each year to it's a scheduling thing on their part, but pretty much the important takeaway there is you can't change your interview date, which is annoying, but I made it work. Another thing that's really super important to note, definitely one of the highlights from this video, is they will send you out a survey either after you do your phone screen or before, and it pretty much says, hey, what types of projects are you interested in working on? And I made the mistake of going super broad, and I'm like, oh, I'd be happy to be placed anywhere. Don't be that person. Do not be the type of person who's like, oh, I'm happy anywhere, because they will stick you in the internship spots that no one wants. Like, I'm not even lying. When I asked my mentor about my internship project, he was like, yeah, no one wanted to do this, so we figured we'd give it to the Explore interns. And I'm like, cool. That's not what they're supposed to do, but also what I would say is, if you do have broad interest, put 2 or 3 keywords. Like if you like gaming, ta-da, like this little Xbox pillow or my t-shirt. I was not in gaming, should disclose that. But to the point, if you like gaming, you might want to put why you like gaming or what about it you like, because that's the most impacted org. It's very hard to get into the Xbox org just because it fills super fast because a ton of people want it. So what's better is saying, hey, I really like UX maybe, and then they'll find a team in Office that does something UX-y, or maybe you just really like using products that people actually use, making products that people actually use, and so you put like, I want something people use every day, and they'll put you in a more popular product. Of course, there are products everywhere. I should disclose it's not just like all Xbox and front end. They also have stuff in back end, which I ended up working on later on, and just an Explore now that I think about it. I ended up in core a lot, but that's a different story for a different video. But to the point, just put down 2 things that you really care about, not things you think you should be caring about or things that you think would be cool, like machine learning, unless you like genuinely like machine learning, then put it. Also, another thing I want to say is you don't need to know everything about, of course, like, you're an Explore intern, or you're trying to be an Explore intern. You don't need to know everything. So if you put machine learning, the first weeks, they'll actually teach you the stuff. You don't need to go in knowing it. Like, I didn't put AI because I thought, oh, they'd want the kids that actually know what they're doing in AI. But then I actually knew an Explorer last year who ended up working in an AI team, and they taught her everything she needed to know, which A, was a pretty cool learning environment, and B, pretty much, I guess my only point there is don't be scared to put down things you care about. Care about things. That is my point there. Sorry, off topic. Back to the video. So prepping for the on-sites. Again, you could read Cracking the Coding interview. I didn't find it too helpful though. What I really recommend, and my secret to like getting hired at companies, is go through their Glassdoor, because even though they're not supposed to, people always put down the interview questions that they got asked. And then my additional follow-up to that is go to the company's stores, like Google or like Facebook, competitors of Microsoft, to see what they're asking interns, because it ended up being like one of the questions I saw in the Facebook comment question ended up being the question I was asked during my Google interviews. So, you know, all the companies have a very similar question pool, so just read through that. It's a really great way to prepare. The other thing that I recommend is those, or at least my year and then the year after me, they ended up doing a couple prep meetings. So pretty much it'd be like this online thing that you could like Skype into or FaceTime into, and they'd go over the 4 qualities that they're looking for, as well as answer any questions. It's a really great thing. Make time to attend that. It doesn't influence you getting hired at all, but it's like when you're doing your homework, you like to know the rubric that you're graded on before you do the homework. The only 2 I remember, they're looking for passion for technology. Like, you don't need to know everything about tech, but you do need to care about it. And then they're also looking for leadership, and I totally forgot the other 2. I think one of them is learning, but I'm really not sure. So don't quote me on that. So the other thing to note is, my year at least, they set up a social event the night before. You really don't need to go to it. Like, if your flight is super late, you can skip it. I'd recommend going though, because you're gonna feel kind of alone on your interview, and when I'm interviewing, I turn super competitive. It's bad. You shouldn't. Be a nice person. But like, I definitely closed myself off to making any friends the day of my interview. So the day before, I made friends with people. I made friends with people like on the plane to my interview. It was just nice because like I had never been to Seattle before. I actually had no idea Microsoft was in Washington, because for some reason I always thought Seattle was in Oregon. So like I got off the plane and they're like, hello, welcome to Seattle, Washington. And I'm like, oh crap, I got on the wrong flight. I didn't. I was just very confused and bad at geography. Yeah, it's okay. I don't need geography for my job, but like, be better at geography than me. But to the point, we ended up just eating like small finger foods, and I spilt it all over my Uber, which is a different story, but it was really great because I made a couple friends who actually stayed friends with during my actual Explorer internship. When I did get it, oh yeah, spoiler to the video, I did get the internship. But back to the story, the very next day I had 3 rounds of interviews. Something you should know about the setup is you're in a group of 3 people. You don't really meet the other 2 people in your group, and you can't even figure out who they are until round 2. But pretty much all 3 of you are seeing the same 3 interview people, and that's why they call it an interview circuit, is you're like seeing all 3, they see all 3. My year they did 2 sets of 3 each day of interviews. Which didn't affect applicants whatsoever. It was just how many people the interviewers were judging and like ranking. The way it works is they'll see some kind of multiple of 3, either like 3, 6, 10, no, 10 is not a multiple of 3, 3, 6, 12, etc. applicants, and they rank their top 3, and the top 3 are hired. Side note, it's a really long day, so prepare for that. It's a half day of interviews, 3 interviews, each one's under an hour, because I know there were breaks in between. I think my schedule went either from like 9 to 12 or like 9 to 1 or 2. We stopped at lunch, that's all I remember. I really remember the food. You get free food, because they give you like a little coupon. But food at Microsoft is not free. Ironically, it is one of the 2 most popular petitions at Microsoft is for the food to be free. But that's a different story. But anyway, be prepared. You might want to bring snacks. I'm allergic to nuts. They do provide breakfast, but like, because I have food allergies, I really couldn't eat it. Plus you want to bring foods and like things that make you feel comfortable. So like I used to have a planner that made me feel really comfortable and professional whenever I was holding it. I also brought my laptop but didn't really need it that much, so I actually would recommend leaving it behind. But yeah, end of side note. Okay, back to the mainstream of consciousness. My first interview. So, reading the coding interview, it said your first interview will be with someone non-technical. So I assumed the person I was talking to wasn't. As I found out after the fact, he was my skip level dev manager. So he wasn't my dev manager, but he was my manager's manager. And of course I talked to him just thinking he didn't know about tech, which is the important lesson there is don't be conceited or stuck up. I wasn't, and I ended up getting hired, which was great. But yeah, just treat people nicely. And so he and I ended up talking about teamwork. What else did we talk? Oh, we talked about the ethics around education and different like education laws, because apparently he cared about it a lot. My mom's a teacher, and something they're actually looking for at Microsoft is a passion for learning. So it worked out really well that we just talked about education and like whether or not we thought CS should be mandated for students in certain grades, as well as like what should change so teachers can get paid more, and like whether or not the flipped classroom was a good idea or not. I think we mostly talked about the flipped classroom now that I'm thinking about it. Oh yeah, Google that if you don't know what it is. It's an interesting concept. But anyway, he and I were just talking. I worried that I was a bit too agreeable though, because like I was so worried that I'd say the wrong thing and he'd dislike me. But then at the end of the interview, he's talking to me about how much he loved going to work, and he's like, yeah, I love going to work, because like if I didn't, I'd just stay home and argue with my wife all day. And I'm like, oh. And he's like, yeah, I love arguing at people with work, you know, it's a nice change of pace. And I'm like, oh, okay, probably should have fought more with you then. It all worked out though. Round 2. Okay, so this one ended up being with the guy who eventually became my dev mentor, and we just talked about my hackathon project at first. We also did a programming question. It came straight out of my exam for like my 102 programming class or whatever, and it was like something about digits and buckets. I didn't do the best algorithm, but he liked, because mine didn't work for edge cases, but he liked that I drew it out. Important note, if you're interviewing any technical interview, Explore or SWE, you're gonna wanna write test cases ahead of time, or else they'll prompt you to do it, but you look super proactive if you write it without being suggested. They also like if you draw out the program and like you draw how it's working. You don't need exact formatting. Like I forgot if length was capital L or lowercase l, because I know in C# it's one and in Java it's the other. They really care more about your thought process. But yeah, they care if you get it right, or if you're going in the right direction. I ended up doing super well in that interview because it was right after a hackathon, and I actually took out my computer. I showed him the project, and the tagline, because it was about field trips and not losing kids, and the tagline was a pun I came up with: who needs a No Child Left Behind act when you could have a No Child Left Behind app? And he cracked up for like 3 minutes. That's pretty much what secured me my offer. But then but anyway, to the point, he did give me one interview note though, is every interview they'll ask you if you're more interested in SWE or dev, and I made a stance of saying like, hey, I'm really open to learning about either, because as I told you, I used to be a very agreeable person. That has since changed. But to the point, I was like, yeah, I'd like either, and then walking back, he's like, yeah, my main note for you is like, you're very good at SWE, you should be a SWE, be more dedicated about being a SWE. And I'm like, okay. Oh, SWE is software engineer, just for reference. But yeah, and then for my third interview, normally, I think it was with a PM. I think normally they were supposed to ask product design questions, but for me they ended up asking about designing a product that I had already designed. So it was really fun because I love product design questions and whiteboard. I should mention interview 2 and 3 were on the whiteboard. I know a lot of people hate it, but for me it works better because, like, think about when you're actually programming things. Either if you're doing it solo, yes, it's in a computer, but if you need to explain yourself to others, often it is on a whiteboard. And for me, it's more about communication, because like if you're just doing a hacker rank, you can't tell like if you're going down the wrong path. No one's like, eh! But if you're in person doing a whiteboard interview, typically they could be like, you're going the wrong direction, or like you could read in their eye or like body language if they like tense up that you're doing something wrong. And I'm like, I need that biofeedback or whatever. So then, yeah, my third interview was with a PM, as I mentioned. After we talked about what I had done, we talked about how we contributed to the Garage program at Microsoft, a super cool program. You guys should all Google it after this if you haven't heard of it already. And it's just one, like Google has the 80/20, Microsoft has the Garage, and 1 Week, which are very cool hacking initiatives. Okay, so now for the decision. I ended up like going home, and then I got an offer for another company, so I emailed Microsoft and they're like, okay, we'll get you your decision back in less than a week. They did. It was like 6 days or something like that. But I actually didn't know I was accepted when they sent the offer, because they sent an email and they're like, we need to call to discuss the results of your interview. And I'm like, oh crap, did I do something wrong? Was there like something wrong on the executive side that invalidated my interview? Like, what happened? And then like I was freaking out. One of my friends was like, Rebecca, would they really spend time calling you just to say you were rejected? And I'm like, yeah, what if they wanted to call and say like, yeah, we think you do better next year, try again in a year. As it turns out, they were calling to say I was accepted, which was super cool. And I worried for nothing. Like, I almost missed an exam because I didn't worry. I didn't study for an exam because I was too busy worrying. But yeah, it's actually important to stay super distracted while you're waiting for get to your decision back. Don't be like me and just worry the entire time. It doesn't help or do anything productive. But to the point, I ended up getting the offer. Something to note about Explore internship offers are they're non-negotiable. So pretty much my year, based off Glassdoor, everyone was getting paid $25 to $30 an hour. I ended up getting the highest end of that. We don't know if it's because I was like the top ranked person. Like, I ended up finding out after the fact I was the top ranked person in my interview circuit, and I don't know if that's why I got the higher offer or if it was because I had an internship in the past and like they thought pay her more or something like that. Oh, important note, because my interviewers were telling me about the other people they interviewed at some point, which they're not supposed to do, but like they didn't use names, so it was okay. But they were telling me about how many of them haven't done hackathons before or like don't have industry experience. So if you're going into the interview and like you haven't done a hackathon before or done any like technical experience before, don't be worried, because like a lot of the people there haven't. Part of the reason they have the Explore program is giving opportunities to people who have never had the opportunity before. So pretty much what I'm trying to say is everyone there still is early in their career. They have a lot of room to grow. So maybe you don't have the most experience. No one there does. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, other things to note are, okay, so general observations about all the explorers that I met. A lot of them love to learn and like improve themselves, as I like to call them. They were agile people, you know, the people who would like do iterative personal development. That is a super hard word to say. Anyway, they were also, a lot of them were involved in entrepreneurship or tutoring or education, and most of them were second years. Like, I know it's a first and second year program, but most are second years because they have more experience. An important thing to note though is like you don't need to be a first or second year because it goes off your graduation year. I know a couple third years in the program, and I know a couple second years that instead of doing the Explore program just went straight into SWE interviews. It all depends on like what prior experience you have. Also, a thing to note is everyone who did super well, they tended to be team players as opposed to lone wolves. So other notes is like, even if you get interviewed for Microsoft, it doesn't guarantee that you'll be like interviewed for the engineering practicum program at Google, though there is more overlap there than I've seen in a lot of other internship pools. And also it definitely doesn't guarantee that you'll get an interview for Facebook's freshman program. They all look for very different things, or slightly different things. Microsoft's looking for leadership and CS training. Facebook doesn't require any CS training, and then Google weighs heavily on GPA, which is why I never get them. But they also weigh their writing sample that they require applicants to write. Cool thing to note at Microsoft, it's not that they tend to have lower GPAs, they do tend to have high GPAs, but it's definitely not unheard of to meet people who had like 2.8s or 3.0s. Because often these people are so involved in their communities and give back so much to their communities that they spend a little bit less time on academics, which is my boat. And like, cool, I found my people. But yeah, other notes I have are make sure to apply early. They do close the application, I think it's in January or February though, but it's definitely better to apply early. Again, if you apply, as I said, Microsoft's very bad about getting back to people in a timely manner, so don't take it as an insult if it takes a while to hear back. Also, quarter schools have a later process because they also have different start dates than the semester schools, which end their school year in May, so they need to get like that pool sorted out first. Then the quarter schools end school in June, so the internships start in June, so they like usually have a slightly later interview schedule. Little secret is the best month to get your interviews is actually November. I can't reveal why. I might do so in a later video. But that's a little secret I have. Anyway, other things that I'd mention are there are Explore internships in, well, everyone knows about the Explore internship program is like mostly in Seattle. There are a couple Bay Area Explorers, like I've never met any of them, but from my recruiters I've heard they exist. You know, they're like the unicorns in Harry Potter, where like most wizards have never seen them, but like everyone's heard of them and they're like, whoa, these are a real thing. But yeah, they're a real thing, they exist. And then also another thing I want to note about the program is it's very broad, but not very flexible. So pretty much my internship program, like I'll do a separate video on that, but when I was an Explore intern, my manager really valued dev work, but he didn't really value PM whatsoever, and then my team didn't do that much PM work. But some of the PMs I knew, some of the Explorers I knew last year did a ton of PM work. They also did dev work almost equally. So pretty much you could end up anywhere in the company. Every team is so different, but once you're in a team, it's really what your mentors have worked out or your manager has worked out. Like the type of person you are matters less once you're on the team, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's a broad company, but once you're an Explore intern, the role isn't very flexible, which I didn't like. But yeah, so hopefully I answered all your questions. If I didn't, please leave them in the comments below, because I really don't want to answer like 1,000 individual questions, but I figured, hey, comment section is for everyone. Like, you know, instead of tragedy of the comments, it could be tragedy of the comments. I'm sorry, that was terrible. But anyway, leave them in the comments. I'll answer as many of them as I can, and then everyone will benefit from learning what you learned. Cool. Well, anyway, I hope this wasn't too awkward, and check out my later videos on PM interviews as well as my actual internship experiences, and hopefully more topics. We'll work that out later. Bye.